Get ready for a dynamic episode of Features Talk, the one and only podcast made to bring the tech to the streets to shed light on how the new era of automation is changing the roles of drivers and passengers today. Lisa Bailey, the founder of FeaturesFirst Auto and co-host Product Specialist Luke Verseput, will discuss how today is no longer just about the art of keeping up with the trends. Safety is a priority. While one can appreciate the luxurious experience cars can provide, when it comes to interacting, connecting, and co-piloting with automated technology, full understanding is needed. Whether you are an early adopter, car enthusiast, parent, or concerned citizen, this is the podcast for you. You will gain deeper knowledge on the technology at work in your car that provides you a safer driving experience, gain insights on your role as a driver or passenger in the new era of automation, and hear actionable advice and solutions when you listen to Features Talk. Here's your host, Lisa Bailey.
Hello, community. Welcome back to the Features Talk Podcast for another awesome episode where we are bringing the tech to the streets for our community members to break down this hard information in this new era of automation that can be daunting, that can be intimidating, and really simplifying this information and bringing it to a larger audience when it comes to technology, how we can be prepared as drivers, how we can drive more safe and informed and empowered. So I am super excited to be here for another episode with my co-host, Luke Verseput. Woo!
Hello.
Thank you so much for joining me again for another episode of the Features Talk Podcast. And we are super excited to have you here as the co-host, as our community product specialist. And so I know that you have a passion for what you're doing, connecting people to the technology in cars. And so I'm super excited to have you co-host this episode with me again. Please introduce yourself to our new listeners and say hello to our community members.
Yeah, it's cool. It's cool to have new people getting on board for the podcast.
Yes.
My name's Luke, and I'm a product specialist. Like Lisa said, my day-to-day is connecting people with cars as far as the technology and features go. It's really a cool thing because I've been a car enthusiast for a long time, a big computer nerd for a long time.
Yeah.
And so, combining these things is really cool. And that's, the whole idea of what we're doing here is with the pace of technology moving faster than any one person can really reasonably keep up with. And since it's now entering a time, especially in the automotive world, of it impacting average consumers a lot more than it has in the past, it's just making the information digestible and, kind of easy to go about learning.
That's right. Yes. And we are super excited to have you here because you can bring that knowledge that I definitely don't have. I love to do the research, but I'm super excited to collaborate with you with this episode. This episode is going to be a building block or a foundation that we're building on from the last episode when we were talking about the technology that are in cars and the level of awareness that we need to have. But beyond that level of awareness, it's the huge topic that is a big topic right now, and that is privacy. And so this episode is really focused on smart cars versus privacy. What technologies can consumers expect to see in smart cars? And the big question, how much data is being collected, right? Data, we know there's a saying, data is gold. And I know that most businesses understand that concept. That's why they're collecting so much of it. Yeah. And so they understand that, but it's now more important now than ever that we as consumers understand the importance of data, what is being collected, how it's being collected, and who is it being shared with? Who is our data being shared with? And so we're going to focus really on this episode of empowering our community on the type of technology that they can expect to see in these smart cars that are collecting data. Your data, it's studying you. And so it's collecting your data, but also what is your responsibility when it comes to being a driver or a consumer and thinking about privacy? How can you help protect yourself? Because the reality is, if you are unaware of how to protect yourself, you cannot expect other people to protect you. You cannot expect, to purchase a vehicle and for them to run down from A to Z how you need to protect yourself in this vehicle. There is a level of understanding and awareness and honestly willingness that we need to have as consumers now to do a little bit more than what we've been doing before. Mm-hmm. So let's jump right in. Let's talk about some of the technology that consumers can expect to see in these smart cars. And a lot of this technology we have mentioned in our previous episodes. We've talked about cameras. We've talked about the 360 camera. We've talked about microphones and sensors, but we didn't really focus on the privacy aspect of those technology. When you think about cameras, microphones, and sensors, these are things that are going to be monitoring the vehicle. And obviously, it's monitoring the vehicle for many things, for needs of maintenance and servicing. If you think about technology, it needs to be calibrated, right? So when it needs to be calibrated, you have to take that vehicle in and get it maintenance right away. It's no longer you can go miles and miles when you need to get your vehicle fixed, or you have a recall that you know about and you're just out there on the road driving. You will not be able to continue to do that when you have technology in your vehicle. Can you agree, Luke?
I don't know if you saw me, but if I just looked like I remembered something, it's because yesterday at work, slow day, we're at the desks, monitoring the phones, basically. Someone calls in, they purchased, I think, a 2014 Optima from CarMax. This ended up being something for me to send to the service department. For everyone who's watching, I don't really have a lot of service experience as I do like the consumer interaction with cars experience. But they said they bought a 2014 Optima from CarMax and the engine ended up seizing. When you hear about an internal combustion engine seizing up, what that means is that the things governing the engine, as far as how the engine operates, just stop working. And so then you can't get the engine to return to its normal combustion cycle. An engine seizing up is, I guess, not really that far off of like human paralysis, The gentleman said he wanted to speak to service, and of course we didn't have any involvement with this car prior to this phone call, and with any of the stuff that happened to it. But he said it turns out there was a recall out for the 2014 Optimas released within a certain time because of a software update in the ECU. Now the ECU stands for the engine control unit, which is essentially the brain that in modern cars, computerized, like tells the engine how to fire. And so there was a software update that was needed for that came out as a recall, and he was never notified. And so the engine seized up, and there he was needing to get in touch with service. So with the increased safety and technological advancement and fuel efficiency of modern cars has also come greater need for very quick and timely service.
You got that right. It has to be that technology has to be addressed. And it's not like a simple fix. Like they have to hook that vehicle up to a computer. There's all kind of things that have to happen.
Yeah, there's a lot to it. And, what you mentioned, like the technology that is called into question when it comes to conversations about privacy for vehicles, a lot of these things are things that you could basically go out to your car right now and already see.
Yes.
My little Kia Soul sitting right out there and right here is, that has it, right? And so this discussion of privacy, not that many years ago, would have been like oil and water. Like, why would you talk about privacy in a car? You get in, close the door, you're in your cocoon. It's like, your own car can be even more private than your own bedroom. What's the big deal? But exactly. But now, like we said, with the advancement of modern cars having backup cameras, obviously, which became mandated in the US in March 2018, and even more cameras resulting in like 360 surround view cameras. If you've seen some of those, increased parking safety features, microphones to pick up, phone calls that can be done with Bluetooth. Bluetooth has been on cars since before mandatory backup cameras were on cars.
Quite some time,
Yeah, there's been microphones on cars for a while. And then, of course, just general sensors, the sensors that can tell the vehicle when to stop to prevent a collision, the ones that beep when you back up and get close to something, so on and so forth. A lot of these things are, let's see, where can we find cameras, microphones, and sensors? Oh, I don't know, maybe right here.
Your cell phone.
Maybe on, the phones that we use every day. The conversation of privacy around phones and personal computers has been going on a long time. But that line between personal computer and car has actually started to blur a little bit.
It has. Yes.
Isn't it interesting?
It is. It is.
It's interesting. You can make a call from your car, but you can't drive your phone.
Yeah, exactly. Well, it is. It is.
Right. And so that's, the conversation around privacy has now made its way into cars, and it's something to be aware of. As we said, the overarching topic of this is awareness.
Exactly.
We talked about awareness in previous episodes, and now this is just kind of another aspect of that, of just being aware of the technology that's around you, is that now there are going to be these conversations around privacy, because there are more systems in cars that, for your own safety benefit, can learn about you, learn your voice, learn your movements, learn where you like to learn your regular navigation routes, like, a regular picking up kid from school, a regular going to your job, and so on and so forth. For your safety and betterment of you as a driver, they can, and other drivers, they can learn about you, and self-driving cars can then be made safer in ways like this, but nothing in life is free.
Exactly. So at what expense are we saying, and what are we talking about here when we're thinking about this level of convenience that is being offered to us? We all love convenience, and like you said, you can go to your vehicle right now, and it 9 times out of 10 in my vehicle, it already knows the last place I've gone, how many times I've gone there. So much so that it assumes that I'm going there again, which means there's some type of tracking going on here, to say, oh, you must be going to pick your kid up. It's 2:30, and so it can get down to the minute detail of, that level of convenience. It's like consumers, we don't think about the privacy aspect. We're just so enamored with the fact that it knows where we're going. And we're like, oh, cool. I don't even have to, look up the address. It's already there for me. And so it's the good and the bad, right? Everything there's a positive and a negative to everything. And so I would say the negative part of privacy in vehicles is you not being aware of what data is being collected and how it's being shared, because it's not a negative thing for your vehicle to provide you a level of convenience to get you to a place or your destination safer, and also to remember, so to be able to recall, which is a convenience for you, but it will be a danger to you if you are not aware of how that information is being collected and if it's being shared with a third party. Because the cameras, the microphones, and the sensors, they are going to be trained on you to analyze everything from your preferences and your habits to how you even sit or indeed lie down. So yes, you could be lying down in a vehicle. Okay, we're talking about vehicles that are being developed in the near future. You will have the luxury of lying down. I believe that I'm assuming, as a consumer, I'm assuming that the reason why they need to be able to train these sensors and this technology to be able to understand you is to also to know if this is an intruder. If there's someone that has taken your vehicle or stolen your vehicle, it's going to automatically know this person is not operating or behaving the same way as the owner of this vehicle.
I've heard of this technology being used in police, and not for cars, but, police officers carry, their guns, right?
Yes.
And they carry their pistol on their holster that they can pull out at any time.
Yes.
And there's actually technology around keeping a gun from being able to be fired if a criminal or someone reaches in and grabs a police officer's gun. Because there are gyroscopes and things in the gun that can actually sense the officer's, hand.
Wow.
Because every officer has a gun that is registered to them.
Yeah.
Right. Because all that stuff has to be kept track of. And only the officer who's registered to the gun can pull it out and actually use it, because otherwise the safety on the gun will be on. And then it's like a car that's been immobilized. There's technology around that. Again, how much of this is going to go back to like cell phones, right? I mean, just the fingerprint sensor on a cell phone or something like that.
That's right. And people willingly share that information for what? Safety. It's another safety benefit. Facial recognition on your cell phone, right?
Yeah, and car theft is something that technology will have ways to tackle.
Exactly.
With being able to detect who's who.
Exactly. And that happens by the technology observing you. We can't get upset that the technology is observing us. We need to understand the layers of why things are happening. And that really just hones in on that awareness. A lot of times if we don't know what's going on and we're not aware, we are automatically alarmed. That's just the human behavior. If we don't have enough information as humans, we automatically it's like a foggy state and we don't like it. We like to have clear understanding and we like to have control. And if you think about technology, taking away a level of control as a driver, you can still gain control by your awareness. By knowing what's happening so that you are more comfortable to be able to adopt these technologies that will and are being implemented in vehicles today.
You're listening to Features Talk, shedding light on the new era of automation. To find out more, go to www.FeaturesFirstAuto.com. Now back to the show with your host, Lisa Bailey.
Another technology that we are aware of is speech recognition software. I can definitely say to my car, call Luke. And guess what? It calls Luke, and so it knows my voice. And if I say something to it, it will do it. But when you think about technology, how many times in our vehicles do we just have random conversations? It may not be a command, but it could just be a random thing. Oh, darn it. I left my, my office keys at the house.
I do very frequently, even if I am the only person in the car.
Exactly. So when you think about the level of technology with speech recognition software that really will be heavily used in level 4 and level 5 vehicles, there's going to be a level of training with that technology that happens to be able to decipher between a command and just a reasoning conversation. Like, oh, darn, I left my, office keys at the house. That doesn't mean I need you to turn around and go back to the house. That is just a conversation that I'm having.
Yeah. I mean, hey, how many times we've all had this happen? How many times have you been talking with friends or something like that? And depending on whether you have an Android phone or an iPhone, someone accidentally says, hey, Google, or hey, SIRI.
Yes.
Yes. I mean,
and after that,
it should work. Hey, Google. Okay, it's just because it's charging right now, but hey Google, hey Siri. I mean, those are things that have become like just commonplace. Just voice recognition things, and everyone has probably seen this in their smartphone. There's a setup process, right?
Yeah.
Started up an iPhone and go to set up Siri, and it says, okay, enable Siri dictation. Yeah. And sometimes it'll have you read a few sentences so it can get the gist of your voice. Same with Google or Samsung's infinitely annoying Bixby, which I hope they drop one day. But these voice recognition things are present, and there are things like that take you through a whole setup process of they give you a sentence.
Yes.
And like have you read it, and then it's like when you think about it, wait, I bought this device, and now it's telling me what to do.
Yes.
It's kind of an interesting thought, and
it is.
And so that's something that cars are going to have. Now, currently, I don't know of any cars that unless you've hooked your phone up using Apple CarPlay or Android Auto.
Right.
Android Auto and Apple CarPlay, you actually do utilize Hey Siri and Hey Google without touching any buttons on the steering wheel or car.
Yep.
For safety, obviously. So provided that there's not that, let's just say that it's just a car without your phone playing into it.
Yes.
I don't currently know of any cars. Some do, but very few.
Yeah.
Where you can actually just say something and the car will immediately stop what it's doing and listening to you. It's almost every car, it takes some kind of tactile input.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
With some fully self-driving cars, they'll probably forego that,
Yes. But you brought up something, you highlighted something that's super important that needs to be brought to the light or recognized, is the fact that we are already as a people introduced to this technology through our cell phones. So
Right.
it's not that we're not familiar with these technologies, because
it's no longer foreign to us.
Yes, it's not foreign to us. It's just being utilized in a different environment. And so no one, I don't know anybody who has an issue setting up Siri when they get their cell phone. They have no problem reading the sentence and activating that service. And so the resistance, that some consumers feel about these technologies really is just a level of awareness, because you are already interacting with these technologies. And that's the reason why the automotive industry is starting to implement the experience that you have on your phone in the vehicle, so that it can make you more comfortable, because that's something you're already used to.
That's so true. Like I said, my day-to-day, Friday through Tuesday, for the money's good, but it's a lot of hours.
Yeah.
My day-to-day is helping customers get their phones set up with their cars.
Yeah.
I have more hundreds of customers than I can probably count at this point. I have never had a single person drag their feet when it comes to setting up Apple CarPlay or Android Auto.
Yes.
Especially the iPhone users.
Yes.
iPhone users are like a different breed when it comes to connecting their devices. Why? Because Apple has the most connected ecosystem of any tech giant.
Exactly.
Google's, now I'm an Android user through and through, and I always will be, but Google's is close.
Yeah.
But there's nothing like having a set of Apple devices that just all know what they're doing at all times.
Yes.
And there are a lot of Android people, a lot of Android customers I've dealt with, who, like, some of them are on board with Android Auto. Others are like, maybe I'll get around to it one day.
Exactly.
There are two kinds of iPhone users that I've interacted with as far as customers. One, people who already know CarPlay, swear by it, probably have built a shrine to it somewhere in their house, and will never touch their car without Apple CarPlay being activated.
Yep, that's me.
The other kind of iPhone user are people who have never heard of it.
Yeah.
Usually older folks folks who, probably the only reason they have an iPhone is probably because a younger relative
told them to get it.
Right. So the grandkids could text them, or so they could FaceTime the grandkids. Right.
Yes.
So a lot of older folks who, have iPhones. And of course, they don't know about Apple CarPlay.
Yeah.
They come from a time decades before Apple CarPlay.
Exactly.
And or cell phones for that matter. And so I show them Apple CarPlay, which of course in typical Apple fashion is just a brain dead simple setup of plug it in and it works.
There it is. Yep.
Right.
Yeah.
And so they plug it in, it works. Suddenly their car screen looks like the iPhone that they've mostly gotten used to.
Yes.
And then their light, you see the lights turn on behind their eyes, and they're just like, like their life has changed.
Yes.
And then they are now going to be a religious CarPlay user. Those are the only two kinds of iPhone users I've ever interacted with. Is CarPlay is life when it comes to cars. And I have never had a single person pick a fight over wanting CarPlay to work. And,
you won't hear that from me, because I don't pull off until the Apple CarPlay is plugged up and I need to see it on the screen. And 9 times out of 10, it's already going where I need it to go. Like, I have my apps all organized. And so it really is that seamless experience, but it also, they were smart because they recreated that experience for you in a different environment.
Yeah, we had it connected on your car before you pulled away. Exactly,
which is, it provides a level of comfort to you in that vehicle, that, there's something I know how to work in here. If anything, I know that this looks like my cell phone, so I can definitely, interact with this. I know where to get to my phone. I know how to get to Pandora, if that's what you listen to, or whatever the case is. It is familiar to you.
Yeah, it's a total comfort zone, and that's exactly why it's there. And I tell people all the time, the reason Apple created CarPlay and the reason Google created Android Auto is to minimize driver distraction, which both of them do beautifully. Some do certain things better than others.
Yeah.
Android has a more robust set of apps that it can use, but Apple CarPlay has a simpler setup.
Yes.
And Android Auto does a better job with notifications, but Apple CarPlay has better integration with Siri.
Yeah.
And so
each
it's like
one has its strengths and weaknesses.
There's pros and cons to each, but there's an important common ground that they both have. They have both They both have made your car go from 0 to 100 on knowing about you.
Exactly.
And
that's that privacy.
Exactly. And so we're talking about speech recognition software. Well, when Apple introduced CarPlay and Android Auto, we didn't really think about it then, but that was kind of a precursor to this whole conversation. I mean, because
exactly.
Why get in your car and read a bunch of text for it to recognize your voice when, just plug in your phone and there's all it needs.
Exactly. Exactly.
And that's something to consider from a privacy aspect, is that yes. It's good to be aware that that your car and your phone will now, be kind of one and the same when it comes to data collecting.
Exactly. And where's that data being shared? Yeah. Because, the original equipment manufacturers, they developed that software. And so believe it or not, you are sharing your data, and you're sharing your behavior. You're sharing your destinations. You're sharing how you drive. You're sharing your movements. You're sharing everything about the driving experience. And so if you don't know who you're sharing that information with, that could become a problem. And so that's the importance of understanding, the privacy policies, which we'll talk about a little bit later in this episode, of your responsibility as a driver. Like I said, you need to be aware that, you have technology like speech recognition software that is being utilized in your vehicle. And you need to, have the know-how to ask, who is this data being shared with? At the very least, knowing who the data is being shared with, and then who they're sharing the data with. Because, that opens up to, your data being money for a third party that could now potentially market to you, bring products to you, and now you're purchasing their products, which is making them money, and you're comfortable. But wait a minute, how did you even know I wanted that in the first place? That's that conversation. And so even with these cool technologies that we're talking about, even with Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, it is very important that we understand the level of awareness when it comes to privacy. And, I definitely want to say this to the community. I don't want to instill any fear. When you think about level 4 and level 5 vehicles, these technologies will predominantly be used in those level vehicles, but these technologies are also apparent in vehicles today. But there is also an enhancement of these technologies where, if you think about the 360 camera and privacy, for example, the cameras are on the outside of the vehicle. So that means it's also picking up on pedestrians that are walking down the street. So, and if there is a facial recognition technology that is at work, that means that camera can pick up someone's information or their face or their data and be able to pull that data into that software. Whether that data would be used, it probably wouldn't. I know Google for the Street View, they have a technology at work where it blurs the people's face. So the public's face that's on the street, it will blur the face so that it doesn't take their data. But these are things that you need to be aware of. And so we're not trying to instill fear, but a lot of these technologies will be used in level 4 and level 5, vehicles. But in these vehicles, learning from our Bringing the Thought Leaders Together event, these vehicles are starting out at $150,000 per vehicle.
Yeah.
Okay. So these vehicles are very expensive. And so obviously the average Joe is not going to be the person, the average income right now for families is $65,000. And so a year. And so you're asking someone to spend double what they make in a year on a vehicle. And so really, we've talked about this before. Where will you see this technology most? And a lot of it will be in taxis, and it will be in ride sharing, and it will be in public transportation. And those mediums of transportation affect everybody. There are many people that use those mediums of transportation. And so even you, in our previous episode, we suggested that the community members get their feet wet with autonomous vehicles. If you like to partner with Lyft and use their rideshare service, they actually partner with Waymo, and Waymo is testing those autonomous vehicles. So even with you participating with something like that, you need to understand what the privacy policy is. Are they sharing your information with someone? Yes, great. We have Lisa who wants to, test out the autonomous vehicle, but who are they sharing my information with? And then what are they doing with that data? So although you may not be the person to purchase these vehicles, you will still interact with these technologies somehow, some way. Mm-hmm. And you need to be aware of the privacy aspect of it, meaning, consumers can experience these vehicles sooner than you think. Okay. And so, when we made that suggestion to the community, I'll be honest, I wasn't even thinking about privacy and looking at the privacy policies. And so that is why this community is so important, because we're adding the necessary layers of information that you need to be aware of when you are thinking about adopting these technologies. And so I want to transition our conversation definitely into how much data is really being collected and what should consumers really be focused on right now. And so the real question is, how concerned should people be with the various privacy challenges that are presented to the driverless vehicles? Because I know that is a concern of a lot of consumers. And it's one of the reasons why they will not participate and engage and interact with these technologies, is because of the privacy aspect of it. And so a lot of people are saying, I'm not a Tesla driver. I'm not going to get a Tesla. Or, if an autonomous vehicle is available, I won't be, I won't be the one to do that. But you have to be aware that not so much of being significantly concerned about the level 4 and 5 vehicles that are obviously a little bit down the line of you actually seeing them and purchasing them, but we should be really concerned and aware of the cars that exist right now, because those cars are already collecting and generating and sharing massive amounts of data. And so there was a recent article that the team was reviewing, and it was featuring Chelsea Colbert. And she is actually the policy counsel at the Future of Privacy Forum. And she's the leader of the Washington, D.C. based think tank. And so it is an advocacy group focused on mobility and location data. And she specifically says in her article that we should be more focused on our awareness that the vehicles are already collecting data. So the question is, what vehicle do you have, and what data is being collected in that vehicle, and who is it being shared with? If you don't know that level of information, then how really are you driving safe? What do you think about that, Luke? Yeah,
boy, when it comes to just that awareness, like already being there.
Yes.
Like it's this eye-opening thing of like, whoa, when did this happen?
Yeah, exactly.
It's like this total feeling of like, when did this happen?
Yeah.
It's the fact that a lot of that stuff is already there. I just mentioned, right? You can go out to your car and see a lot of the stuff that's already there. And driving safely, it's just a totally different take on that. Driving safely, it's now more so than just, I went today without hitting anything.
Yes, it's more expansive now.
It's more expansive than just, I didn't hit anything or anyone today, so I must have driven safely.
Yes.
And so I'll be honest, as far as that, I don't give it a lot of thought when I go and drive. I mean, I would.
A lot of us don't.
I would wager that most people don't.
Yes. A lot of us don't. And that's the thing. It's like the awareness that we are in a technological era. We have to wake up to the reality of that. And we have to wake up to the reality of what our responsibility is in this new era of technology. And privacy is a big part of that. Data sharing is a big part of that. And this is not the topic that everybody likes to talk about. It's easy, for us to just, like I said, go purchase a vehicle and say, I got the, newest Tesla, or I have the newest Mach-E Mustang. I have these new vehicles now and I look cool. That's great. Oh, but there's another level to this. There's another level of data sharing that's happening. And so have you read your privacy policies? Oh, well, I didn't know I needed to do that. Well, you do need to do that. because you need to be aware of that information. A lot of the times we hear about stories of people's identity being taken. And we don't think about cars. We don't think about that happening in cars, or cars even being a part of that. But it can be now, because your data is being shared with God knows who. And I'm pretty sure the companies are, well, we would hope that the companies are, that this data sharing is secured. But at the same time, it's your responsibility as a consumer to make sure that that's happening. When you go get a vehicle, you don't just purchase that vehicle and not look at, the safety rating and the mileage that you're going to, you do your due diligence. You do a lot of research online before you even get to the dealership. So it's like, we're going to have to refocus our research now to really be upgraded in this new technological era to make sure we're covering all the bases.
Yeah, boy, how much money do you think, there's obviously, there's been brands that have been doing gas stations for more years than we've been alive, but
yes.
But think about what kind of up and coming brands are going to start, making names for themselves, with charging stations.
Yes.
Yes. And now obviously it could be possible for brands like the big brands like, Shell and Chevron and Arco and all the really well established gas stations to become charging stations. It could happen. But think about the new upcoming brands. We're a new brand. We're looking to really make headway in as far as infrastructure, is getting our name out there as one of the places to go and charge your car. How much do you think they'd be willing to drop on data to know who likes which restaurant, so they can know where to drop a charging station that can be used while you're going to get a bite to eat?
Yes.
What a gold mine that would be.
Absolutely.
And so that's what I'm thinking.
Right
even cars that don't use that. Don't non-EVs, right? Which most cars still are.
Yeah.
Most cars are not all full electric vehicles. That data is still very valuable.
Yes.
Knowing, you mentioned a Tesla and a Mustang Mach-E and any others. Those are just 2 grains of sand in literally the beach that is cars that can do this. It's nothing specific to those two, but as far as really electrified and really in connected cars, those are kind of 2 of the big ones.
Exactly.
More so than a relatively inexpensive traditional gas powered Kia Soul, for example.
Yeah.
But anyway, with cars like that, or like I said, cars that even don't require charging, like a Tesla and a Mach-E, it's still really valuable to know, what are those regular navigation routes that you take?
Yes.
And so that's where, reading the privacy policy is, it's not something that often gets talked about. And it becomes like a meme. It becomes a joke of how much people don't, agree to terms and conditions when you hit the checkbox that says agree to terms and conditions, right?
Exactly.
Right. See, you and anyone else is probably laughing or smiling or snickering in some way, because we've all done that, right?
Yes.
How many times have we checked agree to terms and conditions?
Read a thing.
Exactly. And so any number of times. And so, but that's going to start to be the thing with privacy policies when it comes to cars and their use of whatever kind of software they're using, because it's important to know that where that data is going to go, who it's, what can be shared, because I don't want to say it's completely behind us, but I don't know of any new car that doesn't have Bluetooth integration. Even the most unashamedly cheap, scraping the bottom of the barrel cheap, new cars. I don't know of any that don't have Bluetooth connectivity.
Yes.
And so unless someone has the nerve to come out with a new car in the 2020s with no Bluetooth connectivity, I don't want to say universally over, but I feel like the days of being able to get a car where data collection is impossible is almost completely behind us.
Oh yeah.
Unless of course you're shopping for a used car. If you're shopping for a used car, that you've got plenty of options. But for new cars, it's almost a given now. It's like you can't go and buy a brand new car using carbureted fuel delivery. Why would you? They don't make them anymore. There's no reason to.
Exactly.
And so think about it from the company's standpoint. Think about it from the standpoint of people whether it's an existing business needing to change with the times or an upcoming business,
right,
wanting to know how they can, how they can get themselves started, whether it's setting up charging stations or setting up charging networks, all these kinds of new EV service stations,
exactly,
battery manufacturers, and all these any ones of these new startup companies, even startup whole car manufacturers like Rivian and Rimac. No matter who it is, think about it from their standpoint. It's like, why would you build a car that can't perform data collection? There's no need to.
Yeah.
It's so easy to do it. Why wouldn't you just do it?
Exactly.
And I feel like that's kind of where we're at now with that.
It is. And there's also the reality that the new cars will be resold on the used car lot.
Yeah.
So eventually,
God, that brings up finishing that reminds me of another thing I was going to mention, but go ahead.
Yes. Eventually, the person who brought the new car will trade that in and it'll be a used car. And so that will be available on a used car lot. And a lot of the times you do not get that. You don't get that VIP service of, having an awesome product specialist like Luke, who's going to sit there with you. I'm serious. Sit there with you and go through these features and tell you about privacy policies and, data collection and just bringing that to your awareness. And you get into the vehicle and you're just happy to have it. It's even at the used car lot. If you're thinking of purchasing, a vehicle that has connectivity in it, you need to be aware. You need to be aware of the information that is being collected and who it's being shared with. And it's happening today. So we're not talking about something that is going to happen. It's happening right now.
When you mentioned people who then would buy one of these connected cars on the used car market, that's going to be a little more of a future thing. The really fully connected cars, like we're talking about, like Tesla and Mach-E and these other ones, the upcoming Kia EV6, the Rivian truck, which has been road tested recently, the Hummer EV, all these really connected cars. It's going to be several years before the used car market looks like that.
Yes.
Right now, there's still a lot of used cars that you can get that where you could really, if you leave your cell phone at home, you could be off the grid and no one could find you.
Yeah.
That's still plenty doable. But so what you reminded me to talk about was not actually having to do with used cars specifically. It's with new cars. It's it's actually new or used. I've had it happen with both. I was thinking more on new cars. What'll sometimes happen, and not everyone does this, but actually plenty of people do. I find younger people do this a lot more.
Yes.
Because it's something that they're much more quick with. Connecting Bluetooth speakers, connecting Bluetooth earbuds, right?
Yes.
Things like that. Younger people do this a lot when they come to us looking to test drive. They'll get there, they'll, show them the car, which is my job, right? As the product specialist, show them around the car, get them on, show them, try and narrow down what car they're looking at. So they test drive the car. And what they'll often do is, as part of the test drive, they'll pair their Bluetooth.
Yep.
They'll pair their phone with Bluetooth. And if you know what you're doing, that takes about 15 seconds.
Exactly.
And so what you do, especially if people are driving and have come from a Kia.
Yes.
If they come from a previous Kia, they already know where to do it. So what happens is customers often, they'll test drive and they'll do a Bluetooth connection. If they don't end up purchasing the car, obviously the car goes right back in the lot.
Yep.
Well, then what'll happen is sometimes another person will come and they will end up actually buying the car. But what's going to be on that car?
That data.
The car's not necessarily all of the data, but the car's memory of the IP address of that device.
Yes. Which you can put an IP address in a computer and pick up any kind of data.
Right. And so by extension, you could get that into a computer. And so then, when I noticed that, I quickly remove that device.
Yes. Thank you, Luke. Luke.
Yeah. Yeah. And not like doing it in a way of like, not letting the other customer see it or something.
Yes.
But it's, I'm sure this is going to become standard practice at dealerships everywhere. Someplace I'm probably already is, but, whenever a customer's done test driving, check the car for Bluetooth connections and then delete any that were on there.
Yes.
that isn't on my mind 24/7. Honestly, I don't think, especially on busier days when it's bouncing from person to person. But it happens sometimes. Someone goes to purchase a new car and there's some Bluetooth connection in there. So just delete that and then pair theirs. And like I said, I've had this happen with both new cars and used cars. New cars because someone did it on a test drive. Used cars, we've sold used cars sometimes. And one there was, I forget which car it was, just maybe last month or something. There was a used car that had it was a Kia Sorento.
Okay.
Kia Sorento is Kia's, kind of mid-size SUV, slightly smaller than Ford Explorer, around about that size. And I think Mazda CX-5, and or a little bigger than that. So it's this SUV, and I sold this. It was this used SUV, and so I get in. I'm going to show the customer how to do Bluetooth connectivity, and there are 5 devices.
Wow.
There were like 5 devices in this thing's list.
Wow.
And now the car was only one owner. The car was only one single owner before it came to us. I think it was a lease return. But it was used by a family.
Yep.
And so it had,
and they had all their phones in there.
Yeah, it would have had, parents. It would have had parents' devices, probably kids' devices if the kids were old enough. And so, there were 5 devices. And so I went through and deleted all the devices. That's another thing is, and this is why you mentioned, of course, the used market. That's what reminded me of this.
Yes.
And, right now it's just a matter of, select device, delete.
Yep.
It's whatever. It's no big deal. Which I'm sure will still be it will still be the case with future cars, but the sheer amount of data that they can collect because when the vehicle someone's getting into is like a 2015 or 2016 Sorento. That's way before. I say way before, but hey, 2015, 2014, that is a technology a long time ago. It is for cars.
If you consider it today, yes, absolutely.
That well predates, cars collecting data of exactly where are you going? What is your driving habits? This was a base model Sorento. It didn't have built-in navigation, so it wasn't storing that or anything like that. It wasn't storing any of that personal information. The only way for a car to store that stuff is via a Bluetooth connection. And when you do Bluetooth, you're not actually storing those directly on the car.
Right.
Some of it you are, but not all of it. There are certain parts that are downloaded to the car, but not much of it.
Yes.
But then think about a car that can be fully connected by itself.
Exactly.
That's a whole nother thing.
That's a whole nother level.
That could be a thing where if you don't actually wipe some data off there, you could have you could have a previous owner's home address.
Absolutely.
You could know where they work and where their kids go to school. So it's another one of the things just for the community to be aware of, and not a way to inspire fear or anything, but just to inspire awareness. Is in the future, currently right now, if you're looking at a used car, look for any previous device connectivity. It's usually just a matter of going to the settings of the car and going to Bluetooth settings, and it should say list of devices right there. It's not a hard thing to do, but it's an important thing to do.
It is.
In the future, though, especially as cars get more connected and more technologically capable of gathering more data, especially when it comes to driving habits and human driving habits, really be on the lookout for if you're on the used market, especially for previous owners' use of the car. And think about when you shop for a used car right now, what do you look for? If you're looking for a used car as recently as 2020, we've had some people come to us at work and say they're looking for a used car, but not before 2020. And it's
you're going to be.
Why not just get a new one? But
you might as well just get a new one.
Well, you know why? It's because cars lose almost half their entire value the moment they get driven off a lot. So that's why it's if you want all the good tech, but not pay depreciation, you look for a used 2020 that someone traded in.
Exactly.
And so some people do that. And if you're looking for something as recently as a 2020, or if you're looking for a 1970s car, which I am not condoning daily drive a 70s car for safety reasons, but
please.
But even if that's your intent, whatever, what is one common thing to look for between a 2020 and a 1960s car? Service records.
Yes, right? You're absolutely right.
So think about this in any car, from crazy technologically advanced to even something as old as where you had to like turn the engine over yourself or something.
Yes.
Basically anything other than a steam car. Then, what are you looking for? Oil changes.
That's right. Previous accidents.
Engine tune-ups.
Yeah.
If it's old enough, carburetor replacements. These are all and in a new car, like transmission servicing, all these kinds of things.
Yes.
But there's going to be a new component to this, something that you would never look for in a previous car. If years from now, when Mach-E's there's already actually a really strong used market for Teslas.
Yes.
A really strong one actually for used Teslas. But in the future, when there is actually a market for previously owned connected EVs. Now that we don't really have yet. That is basically the Tesla used market and the people that are looking at that.
Exactly.
But there's not really a large market for previously owned EVs. There were just not that many of them yet. But when Ford F-150 Lightnings are just a dime a dozen, Teslas already are. Rivian trucks, the Ford Mustang Mach-E is already, I see a lot of those on the road already. And on the higher end of things, the Porsche Taycan and things like these all electric vehicles. Think about shopping for a used vehicle and having one of the biggest things you look for be an operating system wipe.
Exactly.
How unthinkable would that have been not that many years ago?
Seriously.
That is going to be like, what does certified pre-owned mean?
Yeah.
On a current car, it means the engine has been looked at, the electrical system's been looked at.
Yes.
It means safety systems have been monitored to make sure airbags will go off and that stability control is working. Certified pre-owned, right? So you can confidently buy something from a dealer because the dealer's certified mechanics have looked at it and know that this car isn't going to give a bunch of problems that are going to creep up on you later.
Exactly.
Well, certified pre-owned, what happens when you don't need to service engines and transmissions and spark plugs and all these things in an electric vehicle? Certified pre-owned could actually mean
certified white
that you went to your settings and restored to factory settings.
Yes.
Obviously with cars, that's going to be a more complicated process, but isn't that, I find that to be interesting. I know I gave kind of a long-winded answer, but
it is.
That's an interesting thing to think about. A certified pre-owned connected EV is going to mean that you basically did a software reset to eliminate personal data more so than actually, it's still important to look at the wear on the engine, how it was driven. I say engine, but I didn't mean engine, motor, the electric motor. Monitor how it was physically used and everything. Make sure that all that is still good.
Exactly.
EVs are not entirely maintenance free.
Right.
That's an important thing to remember. They're not entirely maintenance free. So it's good if you're looking for used in the future or used Tesla right now, look at that stuff. But also the software wipe. That's an especially important thing to make sure happens.
And, a lot of that will weigh on the manufacturers and the dealers who are selling it. Right. So they will be the ones that are doing the wiping of the data. But there's room for error with anything. And so the consumer needs to be aware of that as well. I mean, you were talking about it being in used cars. How many times do people rent cars? And plug their phones in there. I have rented cars plenty of times.
I didn't think about that.
Seen the previous user and their information in there. And so, and not only their device, I'm talking about like going to the maps and it having information in there. So even if you're renting cars, I didn't even think about the rented car thing. Yes. Even if you're renting the vehicles, you need to make sure that you are erasing your phone and any data connection that is in there. Just like I would hope that when you upgrade to a new phone, that you do a factory reset. I would hope that before you send that phone back in, that you would do a factory reset. But it's the same thinking that you would do with your cell phone, all of your personal pictures and all those things that are in the phone. It's the same thing in the vehicle. You really need to see vehicles today as data on wheels. Okay. It is data on wheels and it is a computer. And so you want to make sure you wouldn't just give your home desktop to somebody on the street without cleaning it out. It's the same thing with a vehicle. You have to have that level of awareness, and not only awareness, you need to know how to do it. So that means that you're going to have to take it a little step further. And so that leads us into one of the things, that Chelsea had mentioned. The biggest challenge facing consumers is to keep up with the technology that is in cars and really staying abreast of what data is being shared and with whom, and what is then being done with that data. And so we said this over and over again in this episode, and in many other episodes, which is why FeaturesFirst Auto exists, keeping up with the technology. That dates back to the episode of the strongest feature, and how can consumers and their inexperience really hinder them. There is not an ability to keep up with the fast pace of technology. It is outpacing us, and we're outnumbered. Okay. That's just the reality. And so you're going to have to put some effort into being able to keep up with this technology. And part of that is joining communities like FeaturesFirst Auto, but not only that, making yourself aware of public policies that are being implemented in the automotive industry. What should you do when it comes to privacy policies and reading them? And that's one of the tips that we're giving out today. More than just reading the privacy notice that comes with the vehicle and their increasing number of interfaces, we are urging you to understand the technology at stake. You need to understand the technology. You have to have a level of awareness of what the technology is doing, what it's going to do next, and how you are affected by that. And more, because more and more companies, I think, Luke, you touched on this, they're building functionality into their products. And so it is understanding the technology that you are working with that's becoming more and more important if people are concerned about privacy. So if you're one of those people that are concerned about privacy, you're going to need to do your due diligence. No longer can you sit on the sidelines and just say, this just needs to happen for me. I'm just going to buy this vehicle, or I'm not going to do it because I don't want to do all the work. Okay, well, if you get into one of those rideshare vehicles, you better believe that your data is being shared. So at some point, if you're renting a car, your data is being shared. So at some point, you need to be aware of how the privacy policies, right? So if you're getting into these shared vehicles, what are the privacy policies? Take some time to read them. Take some time to figure out where the data is being collected, how it's being collected, and, do your due diligence as a consumer and as a concerned citizen. And so I definitely want to give one tip to the audience today. And Luke, I'll let you, expand on it, but consumers should not be taking it for granted that any vehicle today, a new vehicle, or any connected vehicle won't be collecting, processing, and sharing significant amounts of information. Okay, so it is better for you to assume that they will. Look, what do you think about that?
My big thing of what I think for people to remember is this. The word convenience got brought up a lot earlier.
Yes.
Convenience can be both an enormous blessing.
Yes. And
an enormous blindfold.
Yes, it is. Very true.
Convenience can be a blessing and a blindfold. So just, it's something to be aware of. A current car and certainly future cars, just know what's going on and know that in the privacy policy, it should state, what data is being stored locally on the car and what is being shared, elsewhere, like shared remotely. And especially if a vehicle is going to be shared from one person to the next, and then more so than any for rental cars, like you said, and vehicles on the used market, be aware of what data will be left over. Yes.
And if there's something you don't understand, ask the question. If you're reading the privacy policies and it seems sketchy, listen, you need to, before you start participating with things, you need to be aware of what's going on and ask those questions. And if you don't get a good feeling about it, then you shouldn't be engaging with it. That's just the honest truth. Because like we said, these technologies are going to be implemented across different mediums of transportation. And it's starting in public transportation and taxis and things that many, many people, especially in overpopulated cities, are using today. And so if those taxis are using dash cameras or recording devices, you better believe that some of your information is being collected. And so be aware of those things, and do your due diligence. So thank you guys so much for joining us for this next episode of the FeaturesTalk podcast. I had a blast talking about this. It's just one of those topics that needs to be discussed. And I definitely don't think it's going to be the last time that we touch on this topic about privacy in smart cars, because there is much being done in the government to really eliminate risk when it comes to protecting our privacy and the consumers that are driving. So do your due diligence, join the community. You can visit us at FeaturesFirstAuto.com. Make sure that you're listening to the podcast, you're keeping up with the episodes. We're here to empower you to drive safe and informed in this new era of automation. We take our role in this whole process very seriously, because we are consumers as well. So we are just as affected as you are. And so like we like to say at the end of each of our episodes, make sure that you are driving safely. And we will see you next time. Bye, guys.
See ya.
Thanks for listening. Find us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, and YouTube at FeaturesFirst Auto and online at www.FeaturesFirstAuto.com to join the community and empower yourself to drive and ride safely and informed. Check back weekly for new episodes. Until next time, drive safe.